I know that we really appreciate your enthusiasm and I think your optimism, because a lot of times when you're talking about political movement, we get mired down in the negativity, and so it's interesting that you're trying to rally us, and it has a positive effect. I think this is why your organization and the work you do has been so successful, and we really appreciate that, so thank you. I do want to say, I don't know how to interpret this though. As you know, we are taking questions from the floor, and the number one question people want to know is, did you bring any toast beer with you?
Oh.
That is how enthusiastic you have made people.
So my problem is I never check in luggage. I only bring hand baggage, and you can't have liquids on airplanes anymore.
All right.
But that would defy our business model. We could do what all the other beer companies in the world do when they grow, expand production, cut costs, and then start exporting it all over the world. That's not our game. Our game is to find local sources of waste bread, local craft brewers who have capacity that is currently being wasted because they're not making enough beer to fill their capacity, local non-profits and local drinkers. And we team them up, we show them how to do it, and we kick it off. So when I next come to Vancouver, I'm going to drink toast ale, I hope, but I won't have brought it in my suitcase. It will have been made here.
All right, we'll go and...
Can we have a yeah to that? Yeah! Cool. Can I just pick up on something, because you just described me as an optimist.
Yes. A reluctant optimist?
And I'm often misunderstood as being an optimist. I have dedicated 2017 to challenging what is in fact my entrenched pessimism. I am deeply pessimistic about the likelihood of us stopping this bulldozer in time. There are so many things that we can be optimistic about. If you look at human health, education, women's rights, civil rights, all of those things are going in the right direction. If you look at all of the environmental impacts, they're not just going in the wrong direction, they're still accelerating. Everyone who saw the story that this last 12 months was the single biggest rise in CO2 percentage in the atmosphere in history. It is still accelerating in the wrong direction. And when I meet optimists, I'm like, on what basis?
Okay, take it back. You're actually a terrible pessimist.
That is different. I just round it off. I won't take too much of everyone's time talking about this, but it's important. It's different from having hope. We can have hope until the last straw, the last tree is standing. And I think about it a bit like the giant asleep on the floor. And the giant is us, the citizenry of the world. And we currently are sleeping our way through the mass extinction event that we are eating our way into every day. Now, if we had a 1% chance, if we had a 99% chance of waking up this giant in time to save the world, most of us could sit back and relax and leave it to the Tristrams and Ericas of the world to wake him up. If we've got a 1% chance, you can't leave it to a few people. Every single one of us has to be up on our street, feet. Wake up! Ah! Or yeah! And if we say, come on, giant, there's a great big party to go to. Come with us. That's how we're going to wake up.
All right, point taken. So you are a pessimist, but you are somewhat optimistic that we will all galvanize and hopefully save the day. I am going to say, Tristan, we have a lot of questions and we don't have much time. We're going to go a few minutes over our allotted time today. But if we could...
be concise.
Be concise, yes, that would be great.
Don't waste people's
and
time.
We're going to go to Toronto for our next question. There's a moderator there standing by.
Second top question overall is, do you see vegetarianism as a key part of the answer to the food efficiency question?
Love it. I don't make many friends. I'm not going to be concise, I'm afraid, Erica. I spend half my time telling meat eaters they're wrong and half my time telling vegetarians they're wrong. Vegetarianism is absolutely brilliant. The more vegetarians there are in the world, the better. So eat vegetarian for every meal. But shut up about it. The V word is proven to put off 98% of the population. And if your strategy is to save the planet and to bring on as many people as possible, putting 98% of the human population off is not a very good way to go. My first book was about vegetarianism. And I said that in 1842, when they coined the word vegetarian, they killed the movement. Before that, it was an open discussion as to how much, whether, and what kind of meat you should eat. You give it a name, you give it an identity, you've created a pigeonhole which people will put you in and thereafter ignore you. Eating dramatically less meat than we currently do, and dairy products in rich countries, is definitely an essential part of managing our resources and our own health in ways that fully and beautifully align. Definitely eating a lot less meat. And if you want to be vegetarian as a lifestyle choice, that is great. But for most people, they don't see the moral necessity because it doesn't add up. You can produce meat like waste-fed pork, which is actually better for the environment than a loaf of bread. It's not a question of meat is murder, eat is murder, and it's the way in which we eat that we can minimize the total damage that we do to the planet, but it's not as simple as animal or not animal.
Interesting. How do you know when someone is a vegetarian, Tristram?
How do I know when someone's a vegetarian?
They tell you. Okay, good message there. All right, our next question is, how do you get the food for your Feeding the 5,000 events? Is it mostly from supermarkets? Have they started to change how their waste for the revenue waste stream?
Well, you see, Feeding the 5,000 is just a platform on which to launch national and regional campaigns on food waste. And what we do is not just an event. The work of a Feeding the 5,000 is to bring together a coalition of organizations who are active in this space or who are not active in this space but who have a remit to do something, like an environmental campaigning organization or a consumer rights organization that wants to, you bring together that coalition and you listen to those organizations and the representatives of the people where it's happening. What are the priorities? Is it increasing food redistribution? Is it educating consumers about date labels? Is it empowering farmers to stand up to this? Find out what the priorities are, and then we curate the feast to tell that story. So if it's going to be about wonky fruit and vegetables and agricultural and farmer rights, we leapfrog the supermarkets, go to the producers, get the misshapen carrots, and make a feast out of that, and then we tell the story. Because it's each different ingredient of the feast, we use that to tell a particular story for any particular different segment of the media, and by curating the feast in a really varied way, you can get the feature articles in the Sunday papers, you can get the news channel with the hard-hitting facts, you can, etc. So it depends.
You're talking about your organization and consumers doing this. We have a question from Toronto. Do you see government being an influence in food waste reduction, or is it largely up to consumers and the producers?
That is a false opposition. I started to say that companies like Toast and other brilliant entrepreneurs and businesses out there exercising the circular economy are definitely part of the problem. I didn't finish that point. I got lost. My point was, by itself, that is not going to get us out of the fix. In case anyone hasn't noticed, the market is driven by profit, and where it is possible to cut costs and thereby increase profits, their businesses will go if it is legal to do so. And what that means in terms of environmental resource utilization is that where you can offload your costs onto the environment for free, you will go there because it's a way of getting something without paying the price for it. And businesses will do that. They are obliged to their owners and shareholders to do that if it is possible to do it. What we need, as well as all those great entrepreneurs, is for the bottom line to be set by good regulation. The idea that regulation is bad for business is, again, a false premise. If you set the bar where, no, you cannot go and chop down that forest and turn it into toilet paper. No, you cannot pollute that river and cause cost to everyone on Earth and the planet. That's what you need, and you cannot do that without government. You cannot do that without international governance, and governments will not do that until we, I prefer to call us citizens than consumers, because I think we do more than just consume, believe it or not. They will not do it until we demand that they do so. In the absence of good regulation, consumers or citizens have the power, and I therefore think the responsibility, to tackle the businesses directly by giving them the threat of brand damage, reputational damage, through bad practices, which internalizes the costs that they're in the business of externalizing by causing waste and pollution. So that's my long answer to your question.
So then how do we as citizens convince government? Is it trying to get that onto their platforms when they're campaigning, or I'm sitting at home, I'm hearing you say we need to mobilize.
Yeah.
Any concrete suggestions?
Yeah, and everyone's going to have a different level of commitment. Maybe it's signing an online petition saying that, for example, supermarkets should be made to measure and report transparently their food waste. This is something that Feedback has campaigned on for years. We've done petitions, we've done massive campaigns. We now have a couple of the biggest supermarkets measuring and transparently reporting their food waste, and we have a lot of conversations, no legislation yet, on making it obligatory to report that food waste. So maybe it's doing that. Maybe you want to go along to an organization and volunteer. Maybe you want to go and shop in the places that are doing best practices rather than not. Maybe you want to ask the manager what they're doing, whether they're donating their food to a local charity, where are all the ugly bananas. And so there's a little bit of something for everyone. And if you don't want to do any of those things, then just get all the black bananas in your fruit bowl and turn it into a smoothie, and then you've done something.
All right, great. And support Toast Ale, a good cause.
And drink beer. I mean, come on. Like,
I think
it's not
our
that
next
hard.
question, you touched on this. Do you see the greatest changes happening through grassroots movements or through policies? And what advice do you have for consumers to contribute? And I think you've
same
addressed that.
answer.
Yeah.
The grassroots is what has driven the global food waste movement, has woken governments up, and the UN and all of these other institutions.
Unfortunately, we have another question about when will Toast be available in Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, but I think you've also said
I
it's
should have
coming.
said, I actually started saying we open sourced our recipe, partly so that home brewers could do it, but also if somebody wants to do it without us. And here in Vancouver, wasn't there Rye Not? Has anyone come across this? A craft brewer here with some of the people that did Feeding the 5,000 and the Just Do It film. I don't know whether it's carried on doing, but they did a microbrew, and there's one in Toronto in the pipeline. So people are doing it all over. But we want to.
Okay. Well, and Vancouver is a hotbed for these hip microbreweries now. So this could be.
So I think the answer is we are about to develop the online platform that does the work of bringing the bakers and the brewers and the non-profits together globally, and we're actually just about to raise £1 million in equity as part of a whole new category of social impact investment, where people are going to invest, but their investment is going to be locked into doing good in the world. Anyone who wants to know more about equity for good, it's going to transform the market, come to me afterwards. But essentially, part of that is to fund the development of this platform to help everyone in the world just do it and get it out there.
Our next question is, what is your favorite food? Food that makes you go, yeah.
Well, I actually tried to insert a slide just as I was walking on stage, and it was going to be about the doubling food production slide. Instead of the cabbage, I was going to put one of my Siamese twin bananas. I was in Ecuador a few years ago, but I was in Colombia more recently, and I went to the banana plantations, and they're pretty good at sorting all the different grades of bananas for export, for local markets, but there's a huge amount that still get wasted. And the Siamese twin ones are has anyone actually eaten one of these things before? They're like one person. And did you share it? Because it's like the ideal romantic. It's nature's 2-for-1 offer. It is doubling food production, and ironically, by doubling food production, the supermarkets are like, no, that doesn't look right. We waste it, chuck it away. So a Siamese twin banana is they're so
It reminds me, in my house, I recently asked my daughter if she'd like a snack, and she said, yes, a banana, but just the middle part. And I said, she's an only child, and I said, what? And she said, oh, the top and bottom get all bruised. So now I say, there's no middle bananas in this household. It's our mini
Oh yeah, I have a
anti-food
tip
waste.
for I have a tip for that.
Oh yes?
Yeah, I recently had a bunch of kids who literally didn't eat fruit and vegetables around at my house. And I have this thing where if a banana is going black, or if I find a whole box load of bananas in the supermarket trash, which I often do, when they're super ripe, when they're really going black, peel them, stick them in a bag, stick them in the freezer, get them out on a hot summer's day, whack that in your kitchen blender with a bit of milk or soy milk. You can even do without the milk, but it helps. Whiz it up, and it becomes like a soft ice cream. And it's soft and scoopable enough to go into an ice cream cone. And kids, it's so sweet, so creamy, and you can chuck other fruit in there, or basically whatever you've got lying around. Make it go pink with a few raspberries or whatever. And kids will eat it like ice cream, and it is 100% fruit and a tiny bit of dairy. Really, really healthy.
There you go, our own
I
Jamie
love that
Oliver
stuff.
here.
And these kids were just like, wow, didn't know fruit could taste good.
Ironically, some anti-poverty groups oppose food donations for fear that it perpetuates poverty.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
I have, and I've made this argument in my book, I don't think it necessarily perpetuates poverty. I think that there are some government policies that can entrench it, and I think I'm concerned about fiscal incentives. I'm concerned about giving corporations tax breaks and giving them basically money to do what A is morally right anyway and they should be doing, and B, yeah, entrenching it in the system. But there is always going to be some unsold food, and the question is, what do you do with it? Obviously, you feed it to people. If you're going to feed it to people, it does make sense to prioritize people who need it more than others. But if anyone came up with a kind of policy decision that said, no, we don't want to give it to poor people because that's whatever entrenching dependency, just give it away to anyone. I mean, the customers of the very same supermarkets from which it came, why don't we have a free box in the supermarket? We can all help ourselves to it. And if they're worried that that'll undercut sales, just say you can only help yourself to up to 20% of what you spend in the supermarket, and then people will probably come to your shop. So that is not an argument against giving away surplus food.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a question that's not exactly correct. It says regulations exist in Canada that prohibit donation of catered food after events because of human health concerns. How have you argued the case to use this perfectly good food? There is, however, legislation that most people don't know exists in Canada that does allow people to pass on food, as long as there is no ill intent behind it. But overall, I think that fear exists, and it's often the reason that is cited why we can't give these muffins after an event or what have you.
Yeah, your language just betrayed it. It's the reason that is cited. I call it a fig leaf. You find it absolutely everywhere. You go and say, well, why can't you give that to charity or something? Why can't you? Oh, the law doesn't allow us. It's total nonsense. In virtually every country in the world it is legal. And how could you make it illegal to give away food? You have food, you're selling it. You have to make sure it's in a fit state for consumption, whether you're selling it or giving it to somebody who isn't paying you. The transactional process of giving money or not is immaterial to the food safety concerns. There is no law saying you can't give away perfectly good food. For sure, if it's been sitting out for more than 4 hours or whatever the law is, there's a problem. It's a problem of food. You can't sell it after that point either. But if you catch it before it expires, there's no law against it. And food managers around the world use this as an excuse for inaction. Partly it's in education, partly because it's a hassle. And I think government has a role to play. So what we convinced the UK government to do is to produce, for the first time amazingly, guidance on what is and is not allowed, so that whenever a food business manager says that instead of like me having an argument with them and telling them that I happen to know it's not against the law, you can just say go to the government website and find out what you are allowed to do, and yeah, that helps.
Yeah. And I've had the experience where I've seen food being, sometimes you're shopping and someone has put a liter of milk on a shelf because they've decided they don't want it. It's not back in the fridge. And so there is an enormous waste there, and the managers say, well, we don't know. You can feel it. It's still cold, but out it goes. It can't go back into the fridge for this health concern. So I always just file a complaint with the manager if I'm in a store like that and I can see that there is food waste for no reason. Our next question is, you have clearly conveyed the food waste problem at the grocery store level. Data from Metro Vancouver shows 40% of the waste comes from residents. What are your thoughts on the consumer's role?
Yeah, so stats like this are rolled out by governments with the, I'll say, collaboration of industry. And it's an international problem. Let me just show you roughly, and I'm not going to talk specifically about Canada because we have the same kinds of stats coming out in the UK and Germany, across Europe and the rest of it. And everywhere, the disproportionate blame is landed on consumers. This is by and large how those stats are created. Governments pay for people to go into bins, domestic rubbish bins, and they meticulously look through everything that's in there, and they add it all up. And they include tea bags and banana skins and eggshells and bones and all of that kind of stuff, so you get a total tonnage. Now, WRAP have done best practice by distinguishing between edible, possibly or possibly avoidable, and unavoidable. And you can argue the toss over whether a bread crust is possibly unavoidable or not, but making a distinction is very important between food-related organic waste that couldn't have been eaten. But these stats tend to lump all of it together. So you get a huge amount of waste. Plus, all of your waste is being counted when your bin is being examined. Go over to the supermarkets. Not a single government in any country, as far as I'm aware, has done an equivalent forensic examination of the contents of the supermarket bins and audited them on their food waste stats. Neither have they looked into the supply chains on farm and measured food waste. The UK is undergoing right now the first really systematic national food waste measurement on farm. So all of those wonky fruits and ugly fruit and vegetables, no one's measured that, so how do they know how much is being wasted there? No one includes discarded fish at sea, and until we changed the law in Europe on the Common Fisheries Policy, roughly 40% of European fish were being discarded at sea. No one counts the inedible offal in slaughterhouses that are being wasted at the behest of the industry. And most importantly, when you do national stats like that, no one includes the waste caused in the supply chains of supermarkets overseas. So all of those wonky bananas being wasted in Colombia, that's our waste. They were grown for us, they're caused by our cosmetic standards, and that doesn't go on the industry. So basically those stats are created by counting everything, including non-food, against the consumer, and forgetting to measure basically most of the waste at industry level. So surprise, surprise, the industry managed to wash their hands and say, it ain't our problem, it's theirs. And Feedback has spent a lot of time agitating against the false construction of the problem. That is not to say that consumers don't have a huge role to play, they do.
Yeah. That's really interesting, though, where people might want to focus their efforts. Tristram, we have so many questions, and unfortunately we're out of time, but it shows lots of enthusiasm and interest, and we all are very grateful that you've come, and we appreciate your insight. Please join me in welcoming. Thank you.
Yeah!